Well, it's truly wonderful to be back here. I'm a bit of a fan of Wheaton. And whenever I teach in the US, I usually try and drop Wheaton in. And the other place I go to regularly, which thinks it's in Cambridge but isn't, I regularly tell them that they're only my second favourite school. Harvard is number 2, Wheaton is number 1. So it's a great honour to be here tonight. And it's great to be able to come directly from Baghdad. I was there last week. I came over because I had some teaching to do in California. And I came here to see Wheaton, and because I needed to see, well, you call her Valentine, I call her Fuller. That's the Arabic name. Valentine is the English name, but she is like my Iraqi daughter. And God only gave me sons, so I had to find some daughters in Iraq. And it's quite funny because they're very, very protective about who can be my daughter and who can't. Even though I had this inner circle around me of young people, children are the thing which keep you going. Just this morning, Fuller and I were talking to the other daughter, Lena, on Skype. And she says to me every day, "Don't you find any more daughters in America? It's not allowed." So I haven't. On the 31st of October last year, just a few months ago, in the Syrian Catholic Church in Baghdad, some terrorists entered the service. They killed in that service 58 people. They went around shooting them. They massacred them. There was one little boy called Adam. Adam went around after the terrorists and he kept saying, he was 4, "Stop it, stop it. That's enough. Stop it." And eventually they killed his parents and then shot him. What happened that day was truly awful, but it did not end there. What followed was an incredible massacre of the Christians. My guards for them were shot dead. They weren't Christian, they were Muslim, but they guarded a Christian. My chief of security had his legs blown off. And so many people fled the church. We are a rather large church. We had about 4,000 people. We only started it in 2003. It was originally started in 1864, but Saddam closed it down when we started bombing them in the Kuwait scenario. And then we reopened after the war in 2003. And this church had quite a good growth rate. It grew by about 100 a week. 100, 200, 300, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So all the time it has grown. But since this targeting of Christians, so many people fled. And the first people to flee were those who could easily get out, those who had worked in some way with the Americans. And the Americans did a great deal to get them into America. I don't know how many thousands of people have come to America. It's a huge number. Our Christians are in reality Assyrians. They speak Aramaic to each other, not Arabic. They speak the same language that was spoken to the Jews who came in the second exile under Nebuchadnezzar. And we all know that Jesus spoke Aramaic. And I used to think that the Aramaic had come from Israel to Iraq, but it's the other way round. It came from Iraq and went back to Israel. And it was, in our Lord's day, it was the standard language of the people. And so our liturgy is not just in Arabic, but also Aramaic. Did you know that Chicago has the largest Aramaic community in the world? There are more Aramaic speakers in Chicago than in Iraq. They have all come from there, but they are now here. There are more Aramaic speakers in Chicago than in Detroit or California, where many of the immigrants from Iraq are actually Muslim. But here, a huge number are Christian. The patriarch of the Assyrian church is not in Baghdad, he's in Chicago. Did you know that? You didn't know that. None of you knew that. The most significant, oldest Christian community in the world is on your doorstep, and you didn't know that. You should have known it, but I can quite understand why you didn't know it, because they stick together. They go to church together. They speak a separate language together. And so it's not surprising that this ancient Christian community is here in your city, but you don't know it. You are one of the most significant Christian colleges in the world. And here in this city is one of the most significant Christian communities. Now, the persecution of the Christians has become particularly prominent since the 203 war. I had 93 of my congregation killed last year. In the last 4 months, we have had 120. It's very easy to read the stories of what happened to the apostles and the followers of Jesus, like Stephen, and think that was so terrible. But what has happened to our people is even worse. The thing is that if we go back 1,700 years, the Assyrians were like Al-Qaeda today. They were the bad people. And the reason that God sent Jonah in a submarine to Nineveh was because the Assyrians were so bad. And the submarine wasn't even yellow. And then Jonah was a really miserable evangelist. Read the last few verses of the book of Jonah. Do you know what he says? I want to die. Why does he want to die? Because its air conditioning is broken. His fig tree has withered away. Mind you, it does get quite hot in Iraq. It was about 145 degrees last summer. So you can understand why he needed air conditioning. And Jonah was bad, was miserable, but 100 years later, the Assyrians of Nineveh, they went bad again. Do you know what book in the Bible talks about that? No, you don't. It's the most boring book in the whole Bible and the most depressing. Nahum. Who's read Nahum recently? And Nahum is buried in a synagogue in Kirkush. Nahum, the Kirkushite, it says at the beginning of Nahum. Now, it's very interesting that I thought I ought to preach on Nahum because I'd just come from visiting his old synagogue in Kirkush. And I looked it up on the internet, and on the internet it said this place doesn't exist. It must have disappeared, and I'd just come from there. You know, regularly on the internet I see a total load of rubbish. I hope none of you are looking up the internet for your work, because you can't trust it. So, 700 years after Jonah, God sent us another miserable person. What was his name? Don't think they know much. Come on. Who started the church in India? Yes. Doubting Thomas. We call him Martoma. He stopped off in Nineveh, on the way to India. And he met all these people who believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he said to them, did you know that your Messiah has come? And they said, no, nobody has told us. So he told them, and they all believed. To this day, Nineveh is Christian. Surrounded by an Islamic country, there is one city which is all Christian. And the people all of our church, come from Nineveh originally. Everybody. Fuller. Nineveh? Yeah, everybody. And whether they don't all live there themselves now, but their family home is there, their parents or their grandparents were born there. And so Nineveh is the key place. And the persecution of the people of Nineveh has been absolutely terrible. I once told people in a church, in Kentucky actually, what had happened to some of the children in our church. And 2 people run out of the church service sick. I vowed never to tell that story again. But if you can imagine the worst thing possible, well, that has happened to our people. We have had so many people massacred, so many people killed. One day I admit I was in tears. I sat down on the bed in my little room in the church. I live in the church now. And I was in tears. And David, one of the other boys, he came to me and said, "Daddy, don't cry." He said, "They all speak Aramaic. And Jesus speaks Aramaic. So they'll be able to talk to him." So that was supposed to be enough. And in some ways it is enough. I've just brought out this book called Faith Under Fire, which tells the story of persecution and has some of the pictures of things which have happened. And they're not normal things which happen, and they're not normal pictures. In the midst of our intense suffering, we know that God is with us. And some of these pictures show what we perceive to be the physical presence of the glory of God. We literally see it. And we look at the books like Ezekiel, and we see Ezekiel talking about wills within wills, and we see them all the time. And we all believe in angels. Well, we see angels. You know, when I used to come here years ago, I would never have said these things because I had not experienced what we have experienced now. Our church, very large, very active, suffered hugely, is the happiest church I've ever had. Despite things being terrible, we are not sad, we are happy. Why? Because we say at the beginning of every service, Allahumma. I said, the Lord is here. And she said, His Spirit is with us. It's the words that we use in the Eucharist. But for us, they're the words that keep us going. Because the Lord is with us. And His Spirit is with us. We can look at the theory. We can talk about it. But it doesn't actually add up to what we experience. We experience great pain and suffering, and yet we experience huge hope. Huge hope. We are not a sad place. We are the happiest place I have ever known. And we have nothing. Our people have nothing. We have to provide food for all of them after church every week. You come and get your groceries. We have to provide health care for all of them. We have 4 doctors, 3 dentists, a pharmacy, a laboratory, all at church. Ever been to church to get your teeth filled? It's rather strange. But our patients are not just Christian, they're Muslim as well. 95% of the people we serve are actually Muslim. In our congregation, we lost about 500 people after the recent massacres. I didn't think it was good. I was very upset about it, but I did think, well, at least our relief will be able to go a bit further. I went home for a couple of weeks or somewhere abroad or something. I came back and my curate, my assistant, said to me, Abuna, we've got huge problems. I said, what's wrong? He said, there are so many people in the church now, we can't feed them on the money we've got. I said, but all the Christians have left, so many of them have gone. Oh, he said, they're all Muslims. We have now got over 500 Muslims in our congregation. They're not there because we evangelize them. We can't go round knocking at the doors and saying, heard about Jesus. No, they come because we love them. We serve them. The greatest way of drawing people to Christ is through serving them. At the moment, we are seeing huge riots throughout the Middle East. And America and Britain and others are saying they want democracy. Load of rubbish. We have democracy in Iraq. We put it there. We have democracy. It doesn't mean we have a good government. Our government is absolutely useless. What these people are demonstrating about is they want kindness. They want to be provided for. They don't want just the people at the top to have everything whilst they've got nothing. And that is what the people really want. And what really distresses me, even with the Christians around the world, most of them know or seem to do very little about us Christians. We are persecuted, we are killed, we live in mayhem. Not one agency has ever done one thing for us. All these organizations for supporting the persecuted Christians, do any of them help us? No. Not one of them has. Why? Because they say it's too dangerous for their people to go there. Whether it's too dangerous or not, we're not leaving. I have some of my books here. You can buy them tonight or give a donation to the church. This one, The Vicar of Baghdad, is good because the pictures are best. I only look at the pictures. I've never read these books. I just wrote them and look at the pictures. This is the most recent one, Faith Under Fire. But this one is a really good one, called Stuff for the Children. It's good for two reasons. One, because it's not all written by me. It's written by the children like Fuller. They have written their story. On the head is a picture of me in the church. The big banner you see here in the picture was made by Marge Geezer. Our banner in our church is signed by the students at Wheaton. So every time we go into church, we think about Wheaton. It might seem very strange, but we pray for you all the time, because that has really given us a real connection. It's not just a theoretical thing. In this book, when I talk about faith under fire and talk about the suffering church, I see there are 3 P's that really sum up the church in Iraq and their suffering. Firstly, the way they are perceived, perception. If we get a group of people, any group of people in Iraq, Muslim, Christian, Yazidi, Mandaean, Sabah, would you know who were Christians? Masihi? You know. Always. Would the others know? I was really surprised. One day I got a collection of people together and I said to the Muslims, who is a Christian here? Who is a Masihi? And he said, that one, and that one. Everybody knows who is a Christian. They may look all the same, but you know who is a Christian. Hello, Dr. Payne. Very nice to see you. He was the first person who I met from here. He was the one who was responsible for me coming here. So it's his fault. So the perception is really key. It's impossible to say, oh, be anonymous, because everybody knows who the Christians are. Everybody. And most of the Muslims in our people's communities are not horrible. They are not bad people. When the Christians started being targeted and killed, they would shout out on the streets, we're behind you, we're with you. But much of the terrorism and the slaughter of our people was done by the Al-Qaeda related people. And many of them are not Iraqi anyway. So the perception is real. Secondly, the proclamation of the Christians is very key. Even though they might not go around shouting on the street corners, you need to believe in Jesus, they will never deny him. After all these massacres started, some of the children at school started saying to me, all the people at school are saying, you're a Christian. We're going to get you. And the children came to me and said, all they're doing is saying, Muhammad this, Muhammad that. And they really are against us. And we just tell them that Jesus loves them. That's all they can do. So they're perceived as being Christian. Their proclamation is as a Christian, and their practice is as a Christian. You know, in the West, people think they're Christians, whether they are or not, and they go to church at Easter and maybe Christmas. But a lot don't even go for that. We say they go to hatching, matching, and dispatching. Christenings, marriages, and funerals. That's not true in our situation. If you are a Christian, you practice your faith. You go to church every week. You go to church every festival. It's quite funny, on a really bad day when I've got no books to write, I watch television. And I watch some Christian television, American Christian television. It is awful. It is terrible. You know, I think to myself, if I wasn't a follower of Christianity, I wouldn't want to go with this lot. As we would say in Iraq, they're all mahabu. They're all crazy. But for us, being a Christian is practicing your faith. I told Fuller off yesterday because she's not fasting like the rest of us. In Iraq, we all fast. You know, on Christian TV, they say we're going into a 20-day fast. That's nothing. We're in the midst of a 50-day fast. 40 days leading up to Easter. But we fast before then for 10 days because of Jonah. And the Assyrians fasted, and so do we. So we don't eat meat or dairy or what else don't we eat? Meat, dairy, that's it. Sweet things. So it's good for your waistline. But it's good because it makes us concentrate on the majesty of God and his presence with us. So people see the practice of Christians is very real. The Mohammedans may keep Ramadan, which means you don't eat all day, and all night you eat the most you've ever ate in your life. They just eat and eat and eat. I couldn't fit another thing in the daytime if I was a Muslim on Ramadan. But for us, our fasting is serious. And I say to all the people, it's not what you give up that matters. It's what God says to you. Listen to him. And so things were terrible. Our people were being slaughtered, massacred. And suddenly the press did pay attention to all of this going on. And I really thought about what can we do to stop the violence. If you really want to do something, you've got to find a way of getting through to the people who are doing it. It's not getting nice people together with a cup of tea and a smoked salmon bagel. We had formed what we called the High Council of Religious Leaders in Iraq, And I said that to be a part of this group, the HCLI, you needed to fall into 4 categories. One, you needed to be a major religious leader, lots of people following you. 2, you needed to have major access in the media. You needed to be on television regularly. Thirdly, you needed to be the religious leaders who still had a lot of political influence. And so we had people like one of the Sheikhs, Zuhairi, who lived with the Prime Minister and was the chief advisor to the Prime Minister. And fourthly, and most importantly, you need the people who have access to the terrorists, to the bad people. There are certain people you cannot deal with, like a lot of the Al-Qaeda people, like most of them. But you can meet with people who have a lot of influence on them. And so we poured together again our High Council of Religious Leaders in Iraq, and we had not been able to meet regularly since President George W. Bush ceased to be in power because the funding for this process stopped completely. But the Danes came up to help us. The State Department gave us loads of paper to fill out, and they would consider it and think about it. We still haven't heard back from filling out hundreds of the forms, but the Danes did it quickly. And within a couple of weeks, the Danes said, all the money is available, whatever you need, fly them all to Copenhagen and we'll do everything for you. We flew our group to Copenhagen, and for the second time only, we produced a joint Shia and Sunni fatwa. And this fatwa condemned overtly the killing of all minorities, and very much condemned the killing of Christians. And in the West, we need to take notice of this. Religion is very big. You can't just compare our kind of community in Iraq with your kind of community in the West. Here, there may be a separation of religion and state, but even that is only a theoretical thing. But where we are, there is no separation. The fatwa was issued by people who fall into those 4 categories, Sunni and Shia. The violence against Christians stopped that day. There have been no Christians killed since that day, and they were being killed every day. And that, I think, was one of the most significant things I have ever been part of. And it's really important for us to realize that our discipline, whatever it may be, can contribute to making a difference in the world. I look back to my days as a student, both my days of a student in medicine that I did first and then theology. And yes, there were certain things they didn't teach me at theological college. They never taught me how to write Islamic fatwas. They didn't do that. they didn't teach me how to arrange marriages. But I'm quite good at it. We have all the men sitting on one side, don't we? And the women on the other side. And I'm supposed to be preaching, but in between my lines of preaching, I'm thinking, oh, that one would be good for that one. And there are certain rules that the men have to abide by, and there are not any rules that the women have to abide by. But the men know what they have to do, and I've discovered that this is the best way to make people stop smoking that's ever been discovered. If they don't stop smoking, they can't get married. Simple as that. It works. So I will stop now and you can ask me some questions.
Sir, my name is Jimmy Green. I'm a junior political science student here at Wheaton, and thank you for coming to speak to us.
Good subject.
So, sir, in light of your thorough understanding of suffering and religious persecution, in which ways do you see hope manifested, specifically in the young generation of Iraq?
I wrote a book once called Searching for Hope. And it's really key that you say in the younger generation, because in the younger generation is really where I see hope. They don't know anything but violence and pain. But their hope is very simple, and their hope is in God. I said we were doing a CNN interview one day, and the CNN reporter asked one of the boys I mentioned earlier, the one who saw me when I was crying. She said, "What is your hope?" And it was very interesting because he quoted her from the Bible. He quoted her the end of Isaiah 19, when the Lord will build a highway from Assyria, which is Iraq, through to Egypt, via Israel. And it says, "Egypt have I loved, Assyria the work of my hands, and Israel my inheritance." So there's really like 3 chosen people there. And that gave him hope. I thought, I don't think there would be many boys in church around the world who would remember what the preacher said. But there really gave him hope. And it was hope which was a messianic hope. It was a hope about the years to come. My other daughter, Iraqi, called Lena, said to me, "You know the problem is, Daddy," she said, "Jesus said he was coming soon." And that was 2,100 years ago. 2,011 years ago. And he hasn't come yet. And I say to her, "Don't worry, he is coming. He will come soon." Our hope is in nothing less than Jesus Christ, his righteousness. Our hope is really in heaven. You know, when you've lost everything, you realize that Jesus is the only thing you have left. And our hope is in heaven. I've been coming here for a few years, haven't I? But I've become more and more orthodox since I've been in Baghdad. Because for us, Jesus has to be everything. We have nothing else, but we have everything. Next question.
Thank you for coming to Wheaton. First of all, when we meet tomorrow, can you teach me how to arrange marriages?
Yeah, I will. One thing I'm a bit concerned about is the young age that people want to get married in America. And the other issue is that when I used to get interns from Wheaton, they mainly married my staff.
A more serious question. Do you agree or disagree with Tertullian that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church?
Oh, absolutely. I think it really is. And what we have seen is that the suffering of the church, the death of so many, has actually made us stronger and happier. It was St. Augustine who said, "We are a resurrection people, and our song is Hallelujah." Before resurrection comes Good Friday. And when all this happened, I can remember preaching from Romans the first Sunday, "The suffering of this present world is not worthy to be compared to the glory it is to come." And we have seen so much how suffering and glory are linked. So I would agree with Tertullian totally.
Andrew, what can we do to help?
The same as I say every time, there are two things you can do. One is pray, and the other is give us money. That's all.
How do we give you money? Where should we send the money? How do we, just in the most concrete way, how do we find you?
To our foundation.
And you're on with the web? We can find you online.
www.FRRME, Foundation for Relief and Reconciliation in the Middle East.org. Do you know what? When I took over the church, we needed $600 a year to run the church. Now we need $175,000 every month. Not a year, every month. And we always get it. Don't know where, don't know how. It comes. You know, I always, even though it always comes, at this time, just before I go back, I start worrying about it every time, and I say, "Lord, couldn't you send the money a bit earlier?" But he doesn't. It's always usually the day before. But it comes, always. Look at how huge it is. At the moment we had our security review a week or so ago before I came over here, and they said we needed a big wall and a new automatic gate at the church. We have got no money for all of this, but God will provide it.
Do you have any specific prayer requests?
Yes. we ask you to pray for the security of our people. That is really important. We ask you to pray that we will have the funds we need to show our people the love they need, to provide for them medically and in food and in housing. And we ask you to pray that we have hope. So only 3 things. Security, relief, and hope.
I know that our president is, we're beginning to draw back troops from Iraq. And I was just curious about sort of like how you view this policy. Is there a greater need, or is there an area where the United States is just not reaching out and helping security in Iraq?
What do you think? Tell me what you think. I'm really interested to know.
I think my first thought is probably no right now.
Don't withdraw them.
No, don't withdraw them right now. It sounds like things are a little too tense.
Well, can I just say something? You're absolutely right. We need you. We need the US. And the Christians in particular are really frightened about what will happen. And we no longer have any US military on the streets. And the Iraqis aren't really up to it yet. They're getting better. And why are they getting better? Because they are being trained by you. America has done an incredible job, an amazing job. But ever since that guy from Chicago got elected, you must understand that most of the people who influence me are the US military, and they're all Republicans. So I had to become a Republican whether I wanted to or not. Because I wanted to survive. And the thing which has been really helpful, for me personally, is having quite a few Wheaton people there. And knowing that there are Wheaton people there means I know I can go and pray with them. And I know that we've got people who I can talk to. And I look after the General Protestant Chapel and the Anglican Episcopal Lutheran one, you know, the one that doesn't believe much. But it's really good being with both lots of people. They're great. Can I just tell them the little story of what happened one Easter morning? One Easter day, I didn't know what to preach on. And we were preaching, the morning service was by Saddam Hussein's swimming pool. And we were baptizing people there. And I woke up in the middle of the night, it was Good Friday, and that little tune was going through my head. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. And there was such hope in those words. And in my updates, which I send out by email regularly, I mentioned this. And it was quite interesting because as I preached it, there were two people who came up to me and they said, "We know you from Wheaton." Two soldiers. And they were officers in the US military. Anyway, I was coming over to Wheaton a week after or so, and somebody phoned me, and she said, "Hello, my name is Gloria." I said, "Who are you?" She said, "I wrote that song." Because he lives, Gloria Gaither. And Tony here had sent her my update. And it was an incredible experience. Thank you very much. Very good to see you all.
Thank you very much. If you have any other questions that you would like to greet Canon White, please feel free to come up. Let me just say on a personal note that I'm in my 39th year here. I've heard many speakers, I've met many people. There are many qualities that make for leadership, for servant leadership, for authentic discipleship. What sets Andrew White apart is not just that he's a follower of Christ, but he's courageous. Amen. And Andrew, thank you very much for your example of Christian servanthood and courage under very difficult circumstances. You blessed us all tonight. Thank you.
If you would like any thoughts, Philip here has them. This picture, this banner so inspires us. And every Thursday afternoon we have a prayer meeting.